Thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I'm so happy to be back in Taiwan. I think this is my 6th time in Taiwan, and I love coming to Taiwan. And so I was so excited when I was invited by NTU to come and participate in this wonderful conference. And so I thank you again, and thank you for the introduction. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about open education. It's a new term that covers lots of different things. Open courseware and what we now call MOOCs, Massive Open Online Education, MOOCs. Okay? I'll talk about both. Both are happening today. NTU has been one of the leaders in open education from the very beginning. NTU has been very active in open courseware, and NTU now has MOOCs, some of the most successful MOOCs that is in the market, which you're offering through Coursera. Okay? And so I thank you for your participation, and I congratulate you on your success in the open education space. And so let me just give you a little bit of history of open education. My hope is that I will go through my talk, and I like to leave as much time as possible so that we can interact at the end during the question and answer period. Okay? So let me go ahead and get started. In year 2001, we had the start of open education when MIT announced open courseware. Open courseware, as you know, is an MIT institute-wide project which eventually became a global movement in which MIT said that we will offer the teaching materials from all of the courses we teach at MIT. And at MIT, we teach about 2,400 undergraduate and graduate courses. And today, we have 2,270 courses on open courseware. So we pretty much achieved what we promised that we would do. So that was 2001. Exactly 10 years later, in 2011, two professors at Stanford, Thrun and Norvik is actually at Google, who have been teaching their introduction to artificial intelligence for many years as a regular classroom course, in 2011 announced that they are teaching this as an e-learning online course, and anyone can register for this course. 160,000 people from 190 countries signed up. When MIT announced open courseware in 2001, that became a front page New York Times article. When Thrun and Norvik announced that they had 160,000 people registered, that became a front page New York Times article as well. So it's very big news. You know, it's not something that we do in the corner of our campus. It's now very big. In fact, you can see the numbers. Open education projects throw up huge numbers. So looking at the movement that Stanford started with MOOCs, right now there are two major providers of MOOCs. Coursera, which was started by two professors at Stanford, and edX, which was started jointly by MIT and Harvard, together have 14 million learners from around the world registered to study a MOOC with Coursera or edX. It's probably more now. It's probably closer to 15 million. Okay? That's a huge number. What is 14 million? Well, that's the population of London. Okay? You can see how big that is. Or if you like, it's the population of Istanbul. Okay? That's a lot of people who are registered to study with Coursera or edX or MOOCs. Okay? And many are studying NTU's courses. For MIT's OpenCourseware, 1.5 million people access MIT OpenCourseware every month. Just this past month, 1.5 million people. These are not hits. These are real people who access MIT's OpenCourseware, the 2,000-some courses. Since the inception of OpenCourseware in 2001, 175 million unique users have accessed MIT's OpenCourseware. Huge number, 175 separate people from around the world accessed MIT's OpenCourseware. So both OpenCourseware and MOOCs are going very strong. And as I continue to say, NTU is a leader in both. 175 million people. That's the population of Taiwan, population of Japan, and I think few more. Okay? You're talking about a huge number of people. Okay? What you can imagine from these huge numbers is that this cannot help but to change the way we learn and the way we teach. And at the end, I would like to think with you on what these big numbers mean for NTU, for University of Tokyo, for MIT, for Stanford, for Harvard, and for the learners from all over the world. Okay? I think it's changing. It's already changing the way that education is being done. We haven't quite noticed it because it hasn't been reported on the front page of New York Times yet. But I think the change has already occurred. Let me take you through a little bit of MIT's OpenCourseware. I think all of you know a lot of this. So this is one department at MIT, Aeronautics and Astronautics. This is the top Aeroastro department in the US. And you can see that Aeroastro has put up basically all of their graduate and undergraduate courses on MIT's OpenCourseware. So let's look at the first one. This is Introduction to Aeroastro. So every undergraduate student who majors in Aeroastro takes this course. You can see on the left the syllabus, calendar, readings, assignments, projects, and so forth. Let's look at projects. MIT is very much a project-based educational pedagogy. And this is no exception. So this is an introduction to Aeroastro, and so students are required to build something that flies to get their grade for the course. And it's a lighter-than-air design. And the objective of this term project is to build something that is lighter than air, so it flies, it's stable, it's controllable, it's reliable, able to carry a payload, fast, and this is very important, aesthetically pleasing and elegant in design. It can be fast, you can carry lots of payload, but if it doesn't look good flying, then you will not get an A. Okay? The professor has set up this very big race course around which students fly their lighter-than-air vehicle, and they're judged on how much payload, how reliable, and how beautiful it is to fly. Okay? So this is one example. To shift to another part of the campus, this is my course, Asia in the Modern World, Images and Representations. This is a course and a project that I do with Professor John Dower, who's a very eminent historian. And let me see. This is the site. The idea with visualizing cultures is that we look at history through visual materials. And so the first unit that we did was on the arrival of Admiral Perry of the United States Navy in Japan in 1853. Japan had been closed to the world, virtually completely closed to the world for 250 years until Perry arrived. And he said, open up your markets. Whaling was a very big business back then. And Perry needed Japan to open up so that American whaling ships can go to Japan and resupply and so forth. Okay? And so we collected something like 450 images of what happened when Perry arrived. It was a very interesting time. Two societies, two cultures that had been completely separated come clashing together in this episode. And what's interesting when you look at images is that you can see that the Japanese artists really tried to depict Perry. Perry did not come out of his ship very often. He wanted to exude power and authority. And the way he figured he should do that is to not be so visible to the people. Okay? And so the people could kind of imagine how powerful he is. And so artists had to guess what he looked like by hearing rumors. And so what the artist ended up depicting is Perry, who looks more like a powerful Japanese politician. He looks like a very well-known politician by the name of Saigo Takamori. Okay? You can also see that the artist heard that Westerner has blue eyes. Okay? But if you look, the blue is in the wrong place. Okay? And so these things that you find. Okay? And we have many units. I hope you'll take a look. We have altogether 52 units, including many units on China. Okay? This is a wonderful unit on rise and fall of the Canton trade system. Okay? And we did this with the Peabody Essex Museum just outside of Boston. And it's done by a professor from Yale, okay? Peter Perdue. Okay? So you can go to this by typing in visualizingcultures.mit.edu. It's used by many schools and universities in the United States. Okay, now we go to computer science. And computer science, this is the largest department at MIT. And you can see these are all undergraduate courses, still undergraduate courses. And now we get to graduate courses. I think they put up something like 180 courses. I tried to count, and I think it was up to not quite 200, but close, that they have put up the content for. Let's take a look at what this looks like. Let's look at circuits. Okay, this is a very famous computer science course, circuits and electronics. This course is taught by Anant Agarwal, who is also the chairman of edX. Okay? And Professor Agarwal, like the previous Aero-Astro course, has syllabus, calendar, lecture notes, and so forth. Let's look at his lecture notes. Professor Agarwal has provided on his OpenCourseWare site the lecture notes to all of his lectures for circuits. Okay? So let's take a look at one of them. Very detailed lecture notes, as you can see. If you go through his lecture notes, you can pretty much see what he did in this lecture. And he has lecture notes for every one of his lectures. Let's look at assignments. Okay? Professor Agarwal has made available the actual assignments that he required his students to do. Okay? These are real assignments. Now, there are professors who not only provide assignments, real assignments from their courses, but also the answers to the assignments. circuits, for example, is being taught every year. So when you think about, so his students can see this. Okay? And for those professors who provide answers to assignments, their students can see the assignments and answers. So, what does that mean? Well, it's very simple. It means that after this professor put up his or her assignment and answers, he or she had to go back and create a completely new set. Okay, that's quite an endeavor. This is how much they wanted to share with the world what they're doing. Professor Agawa has also offered his quizzes, his exams that his students did. This is a real exam from his course. And again, there are professors who not only provide exams, but also answers to the exams, which means that she or he had to change the exams the following year. Okay. So it's the final example. This is from the Sloan School, MBA Business School. And Sloan School has put up a large number. And let me see. Let's take a look at. So one of the important things about doing business is communication. You have to be able to clearly communicate what you are doing in your business to be successful. And so Sloan School has a number of communication courses. Even though you may not be in business, you may be interested in looking at some of these courses. They're sort of basic, communication courses to teach you about how to be an effective communicator. Okay? I found this course, and one of the interesting PowerPoints I found is working effectively with a difficult audience. Okay, vice presidents and chairmen. Very basic information that anyone can use. Okay? So the situation is that you are president of your company. Your stock has really went down this quarter. Now you're facing your stockholders in a stockholders meeting. How do you deal with a hostile audience? Okay? It's real world. And they have real cases of such meetings. Okay? And so the basic points. So the kinds of skills that you have to have, you not only have to have verbal communication, but nonverbal behavior. You have to look at the audience, how they are behaving. Okay? You have to set an encouraging tone. You have to ensure understanding between you and the listener. Okay? Dealing with difficult questions, we get that all the time. Often the questions are not clear. They're confusing, and the questions tend to be framed in a certain way that you may not agree with. And so you have to really think about how do you want to answer this question. Okay? Sometimes you don't know. Okay? Be polite. That's always a good rule. Be polite. Okay? Lessen hostility by pointing to common ground. You're always looking for common ground. Okay? No matter how difficult the situation is, and so forth. And if someone is too hostile, you have to be willing to interrupt. Okay? That happened actually 2 days ago when President Obama was giving a speech, and there was someone in the audience who kept heckling him, and he finally cut her off, and she had to be taken out of the room. So, presidents are very used to dealing with audience, and vice presidents, and chairs as well. Okay? So there's some interesting courses like this. Do take a look. Huge numbers, 2,000 courses. Okay? MIT's OpenCourseWare, as I said, is being accessed by 1.5 million people each month. And as you can see, the number keeps growing. Okay? It's interesting that as the MOOCs came onto the scene, the number of people who use OpenCourseWare also increased. Okay? I think one of the reasons is that MOOCs are paced in a classroom-like pace. Many people register for the MOOC and find that they cannot stay with the MOOC. For example, Professor Agarwal's Circuits MOOC, which was offered in 2012, 160,000 people registered for it. But with MOOCs, every week you lose 50%. Okay? And many of them migrated to his OpenCourseWare Circuits course that you just saw. And so we saw that number just really boost up during his MOOC. Okay? So one of the things, so I was chair of the MIT Open Courseware Faculty Advisory Committee, and I was often asked, why is MIT giving away for free and openly all of this very valuable intellectual content? Okay? I was asked that very often. And I ended up quoting then president of MIT, Charles Vest, who said that if you share money, it disappears, but if you share knowledge, it increases. Okay? That in this tiny little quote captures, I think, the spirit and the heart of open education. Okay? If you share money, it disappears, but if you share knowledge, it increases. Okay? This is why we are doing OpenCourseWare. Okay? It's a wonderful quote, and we all believe in this quote, and this is why we are sharing it. And I'm certain that NTU has exactly the same spirit. Okay? You want to share your knowledge, and as you share your knowledge, not only do you educate the world, but that you increase your own knowledge by learning how to share your knowledge with the world. It turns out that OpenCourseWare fits exactly with MIT's mission, and this is very important. Okay? This is from MIT's mission. The Institute is committed to generating, disseminating, and preserving knowledge, and to working with others to bring this knowledge to bear on the world's great challenges. Okay, this is MIT. This is MIT at its its heart. Okay? This is what MIT faculty members work every day, day in, day out, okay? Committed to this value of generating and disseminating and preserving knowledge, and trying to fix the world, a world that is broken. Okay? In many ways. Okay? And this mission has been implemented up to OpenCourseWare through basic research. But now with OpenCourseWare, MIT is able to fulfill this mission with education as well. Okay? So it fits the MIT mission. And that's very important for open education. And this is something that I tell people when they ask me, how do you do OpenCourseWare? How do you do MOOCs? The first thing I say is that in order to be successful in open education, as an institution, you have to do something that fits with your institute's mission. Okay? If you try to do something that is separate from your mission, you will not succeed. Okay? And I know that with NTU, you have really thought about this, and the OpenCourseWare and the MOOCs that you're offering very much are consonant. They reflect your basic institutional mission. Okay? That's why you have been so successful. Okay. Let me now quickly move to MOOC. Oh, no, one more thing, excuse me. When we were launching OpenCourseWare in 2001, next door at Harvard, Professor Lessig, the professor of law, and some of his colleagues were developing this idea of Creative Commons. Okay? Many of you know Creative Commons. It's a legal license to make available content on the web. It's an agreement, a legal contract between the provider of the content, such as NTU and MIT, and the user. Okay? And when we saw this, we said, let's adopt this for all of OpenCourseware. And so all of MIT's OpenCourseware is licensed under Creative Commons. What this means is that if you use something from MIT's OpenCourseware, okay, for example, any of the visuals from my course, for example, or Professor Anand's lecture notes, they are available for you. You can freely download, you can freely copy, you can freely distribute, you can freely alter them. You can even incorporate it into your own material. Okay? You're free to do that. Creative Commons license allows you to do that legally. Okay? This was very important to us because we didn't want to just say you can look at our course material. We wanted to say you can use our course material. Okay? So this is what we did with Creative Commons. Okay? So all of these materials, for example, okay? For visualizing cultures, we have agreements with about 200 different museums around the world that have agreed to let us use their visual materials under Creative Commons. Okay? So you're free to download and distribute for educational use. Okay, so let's go to MOOCs. Okay? Lots of MOOCs. I think there are close to 2,000 MOOCs, including many from NTU. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about my own experience with MOOCs. Last year, we decided to do a MOOC jointly between MIT and Harvard based on visualizing cultures. And we called it Visualizing Japan. So let me show you the trailer first.
On July 8, 1853, residents of Edo beheld an astonishing sight. 4 foreign warships had entered their harbor under a cloud of black smoke. Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States had arrived to force the long secluded country to open its doors to the outside world.
Imagine this scene. Police boxes throughout the city of Tokyo are destroyed. Buildings and streetcars are torched. The government responds by declaring martial law. It seems as if the recent war with Russia has come home. The Hibiya riot marked the first major social protest of the age of imperial democracy.
An elegantly dressed European woman holding a camellia blossom lies luxuriously on a chaise lounge. This could describe a French image of a stylish Parisienne, but is in fact a 1920s Japanese advertisement for the cosmetics company Shiseido. There is no Japanese company whose advertising design better represents cosmopolitan chic in early 20th century Japan.
So this is Professor John Dower, who's a very, very famous historian. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1999 for his book, Embracing Defeat. We filmed this at MIT. Some of you may recognize the location. We filmed both at MIT and at Harvard. Okay? There's lots of things that we learned from doing this. Okay? One of the things is the length of the video. Okay? Those of you who are involved with production of MOOCs at NTU know this, but the videos for MOOCs tend to be very short. This is 4 minutes and 15 seconds long. Okay? That's about average. Our videos range from minute and 30 seconds to as long as 10 minutes. 10 minutes feels too long. A colleague of mine at University of Tokyo, Professor Yoshimi, made a very, very insightful observation. He said, when you start with a movie screen, it's a big screen, you can tell a big story in 2 hours. That reduced to a TV screen, much smaller, and so you tell a 1 hour or 40-minute story. And then you reduce to a tiny little screen on your mobile, and now it can only be 2 minutes. Okay? It's very, very insightful. Okay? We learned, we used to put our 90-minute lectures on the web, and we found that nobody was looking at them for 90 minutes. And then Sal Khan of Khan Academy came along, and he said, a video should be 10 minutes and no longer. But now we are finding that 10 minutes is too long. Something else that I found, I was offering this MOOC. We started September 4th with the MOOC. We had 3,000 people taking this MOOC. But alongside it, I was teaching an MIT course, exactly the same title, Visualizing Japan. And I had 9 people. Okay? It was a new course, and so I had 9 people here, 3,000 people here. What was interesting was that I was able to see how learners use the video, because I could see what my students were doing. And one thing that I learned that really surprised me is that, so this is Professor Dower speaking like Professor Dower. But no one listens to it at 1.0. Everyone listens to it at least at 1.5. Some people will listen to it 2.0. And if they miss something, they don't go back. They just look at the subtitle. This subtitle we created in order to meet the Labor Department's requirement for equal access, for people who cannot hear. But it turns out that this is a very important pedagogical device. I had Professor Dower came to do a guest lecture towards the end of my class, and I was watching my students, and I could see that they sort of wanted to click and make him speak faster. I told Professor Dower this after the class, and he said, I will never come back. So we filmed at Harvard, a lot of the video. Harvard created this incredible facility in the basement of the Widener Library. Widener is the famous library. This is the Hauser facility for video. 3 cameras. These are Hollywood style cameras. And I think Harvard has an ambition to become the Hollywood of education. So we were able to take advantage of that. Along with videos, as you know, with MOOCs, we do these exercises which are machine graded, which we call finger exercises. Because we deal with visuals, this is MIT now, we program some interesting assessments. So this is a timeline, historical timeline. You have visuals here. You just drag and drop the images into the right time slot. And it's also machine gradable as well. 9,000 registered, 3,000 showed up. That's very typical because anyone can register. And 1,170 completed the course. In terms of countries, 34% from the United States, 10% from Japan. That's actually quite high. Usually we get 3% from Japan for our edX and I think Coursera courses. But because this was on Japan, we had higher number. And then UK, Germany, China, Spain, and so forth. The top countries tend to be English-speaking or European countries that do English language education from very early on. Okay? This is a very typical breakdown. We had one person register from North Korea. Okay? I don't know how that was done. Yeah. I asked my other colleagues, and they said, yeah, I get one person from North Korea as well. So someone's registering. I don't know exactly how. Very high level. I will be curious to see what the NTU learning population is. 60% are PhD students or teachers or professors. 44% have been teachers at some point. 26% are currently college students. And 70% indicated that they have background in history or humanities. Very high level. And this is also very typical. Okay? And it makes sense. Okay? If you have an MIT course, a Harvard course, an NTU course, these are produced by NTU professors, MIT professors. These are high-level courses. So you would expect them to be of high-level learners. The discussion forum was very, very useful. This was a very exciting part of my participation in the MOOC. I got an inkling of what this discussion forum was going to be like. On the second day, we just put up this image on the discussion forum. Okay? It's an image from Shiseido. It's a 1930s image. And we told the participants, talk about cosmopolitanism in this image. And 804 people put up very, very substantial comments. No, not comments like it's pretty, but really substantial comments. 804 people. That's quite remarkable. Another thing that one of my students, residential students, did was we tried to figure out who are staying with the MOOC until the end. Okay? One of the issues with the MOOC is that each week 50% drop off. Okay? And that's just, but you're starting with a huge number. So my student came up with the hypothesis that people who contribute to the discussion forum tend to stay until the end. And so to test this hypothesis, what he did was he looked at the second day, the 9th day, and the 20th day. These were points at which we put up discussion topics to encourage discussion. And what he found was that his hypothesis was correct. The outer brown line is when we started. The green is the second day. The average number of contributions for those who were active in the forum was 2.68. The yellow circle is the 10th day, and you can see that the number of contributions has increased, and by the end, by the 20th day, those who remain were contributing average of 10.02 times. Okay? So from that simple research, we discovered that if we could get people to contribute to the forum, we'll get more people to stay with the course. Okay? And so now I am creating a project with my colleagues in the AI lab at MIT to look at learners and to see how we can intervene to encourage more participation in the forum. Okay? One of the exciting things for me, and this is a very important point for MOOCs, is that, as I said, I was teaching an MIT course along with the MOOC. And so this was a blended course. Some of my classes some of my lessons were traditional lecture class, but many of my classes turned out to be what's called flipped class. Okay? I know many of you know what that is. I know there's a session on that this afternoon, which I plan to attend. And one of my students actually measured the amount of time that teacher, myself, and students spend during the two different, the traditional lecture versus the flipped class. And what we found was that in the traditional class, I was speaking 80% of the time, students 20% of the time. That's pretty good. Okay? But in the flipped class, we were 50-50. And the class was qualitatively different. It was more fun. Students were retaining knowledge so much better. And for the first time since being at MIT, for my teaching evaluation, I got a perfect score. So, so it's great for the teachers. Okay? this is a very important point for MOOCs and open education in general. We tend to do open education in order to promote our institution to the world. Okay? But ultimately, what we do with open education must have a significant impact on on-campus education. Okay? Otherwise, I don't think we can sustain open education. Okay? And so flipped class is a very, very important part of open education. We must work very hard to incorporate that into our institution. Just a final point. This is a young man who showed up in my Visualizing Japan MOOC. Ahan is his name. He told me that, that this is his 16th MOOC. Okay? He also happens to live in Cambridge, where MIT is, and he's being homeschooled as a high school student. He just sent me an email saying that he basically received all of his high school education by taking MOOCs. He's 15 years old, and he's just been accepted into MIT. Okay? So this is the future. Okay? Here are the MOOCs that he's taken. Mostly STEM courses, but there's a Visualizing Japan as well. Okay? So he studied with MOOCs, 15 years old, and he will be a freshman at MIT in September. Okay? This is a new world. I think there's a huge change that's already taking place. We haven't quite noticed it yet, but it's already changed. And our institutions, especially the elite institutions like NTU and MIT and University of Tokyo, must catch up with our young people. Thank you so much.